Subject Epsilon, in the Dossier of Deplorables, is a congenital liar by the name of Alison. I think it's Tieman. She claims many things within her degenerate witherings, among which is the accreditation of being the creator of Honey Badger Radio. If this is true, she is without doubt a sinister, all-powerful force for evil, and also entirely incompetent. Don't look at me like that. One can easily be both. And if it's a lie, then clearly she's as incompetent as she is evil. And clearly it is a lie. She's evil. And it is an incompetent lie at that. It's fairly obvious that the Mexican is in charge. The following presentation contains found footage recovered from an 8mm analog video cassette discarded in a dumpster and covered in medical waste. It is prohibited to view this material without frequent breaks and without vigilant supervision from a professional such as myself. Though it's against my superior judgment to commit any man-interruptions, I think all my fellow right-thinkers would agree my true and effervescent luminosity represents everything pure and righteous about the feminine. And the skullduggerous machinations of this insipid she-dwarf represent everything corrupt about the patriarchy. So for the purposes of this video response, I am female and she is male. Therefore I get to do everything that men normally do. I don't think anyone in their right mind could possibly disagree. Trigger warning. The thoughts you are about to hear are wrong and are legally considered obscene in 47 states. Distribution of this material without license is therefore a criminal offence under the Equal Thoughts Act of the current year. You have been warned.
What if the whole world thinks you're wrong? What if the whole world hates you? What if the whole world jeers at you, mocks you, spits at you? Would you keep going?
No. That's probably just you being wrong. Like my old grandmama used to say, if you want to be correct, first you must be popular. She had a lot of sense, my old grandmama. Sense that she would use as window dressing for what is very obviously an argument about populum. But like my old grandmama used to say, it's not a fallacy if it's useful.
If any single one of you wants me to turn in my men's rights badge for advocating for the human rights of Muslim men and defending them against the charge of felony oppression, a charge some are convinced they are guilty of on accusation alone, I will. You don't put a badge on yourself, you don't choose a badge, it chooses you. And if nobody steps up to tell me to hand in my badge, if it isn't a deal breaker for me, then it shouldn't be for anyone else currently fighting for the recognition of Muslim men's human rights in our civil war, in our little civil war. When people ask me what I am, I will say I don't do labels, but I proudly bear the badge of men's rights activist given to me by the men's rights community. And if, for whatever reason, you don't think I deserve to carry the badge of men's rights, fine. Last episode, I ended by saying I'd badger, and I still will. I'll never stop upholding the principles my badge used to represent. I'll never stop defending men, because at the end of the day, a badger knows it's not about the badge, but the actions that earn it. I am what I do, and what I do is obvious.
You badger people. That's what you badger people do, you badger people. You badger people, you. By the way, I took the liberty of consulting the dictionary with regards to the transitive verb to badger. Would you like to know what it says? Badger. Verb. Used with object. To harass or annoy persistently. Pester. Nag. Example? I had to badger him into coming with us. That's what you are, isn't it? You're a badgerer. Someone who goes right into someone's personal space and makes a loud, incessant noise until you get a response. Which, funnily enough, is also a pidgin English name for a telephone.
Before I was a men's rights activist, I was a questioner. When someone said, you can't question that, whenever they shamed me for asking, a switch flicked in my brain. I was compelled to defy them, to look at the evidence and arguments for and against, to do my own digging. As a questioner, I did a lot of digging, ferreting down those roots of axiomatic beliefs that everyone knows are right, just right in their bones. When society declares an orthodoxy, it has to hide a lot of bodies, a lot of incriminating evidence that those beliefs are not absolute.
Poppycock! God's will is unfathomable.
For example, when you say God's will is unfathomable, you have to hide that nature is in some ways predictable, that it obeys laws that can be measured and understood.
Ha! Isaac Newton was a charlatan and a failure. He never even had sex with a lady. And he died childless. You call that a successful human?
From all that digging, I found the subterranean chasms where our society hides its uncomfortable truths, its incriminating evidence, the things we cannot acknowledge because of doctrine and dogma. In one particularly deep, dark, and hidden chasm, I found men's rights. I found a counterculture of people defined by their understanding of a single truth. Men hurt too. Being a questioner led me to men's rights, but it did not make me a men's rights activist. 4 years ago, the Southern Poverty Law Center declared men's rights groups were hate groups. It sort of maybe took it back and then said they were just misogynists. During that time on Men's Rights Reddit, a number of men expressed the desire to kill themselves for being declared apostate by the SPLC.
Don't you dare besmirch the reputable name of the SPLC. They are good people. And Ayaan Hirsi Ali is a dangerous Islamophobe. Would anyone fancy a freshly picked cherry?
Feeling helpless to do anything, I declared my online persona, Typhon Blue, a men's rights activist. So if those men were declared apostate and thrown out, so too would Typhon Blue be apostate and thrown out. But that still didn't make me a men's rights activist. 3 years ago, a man named Earl Silverman, who had been running a men's shelter, the only men's shelter in Canada, out of his own home, lost that home and killed himself. He killed himself after 20 years of trying to get the government of Alberta and feminists to recognize that men hurt too. In honor of Earl, I decided to put my real name out as a men's rights activist. But none of that makes me a men's rights activist.
Certainly not. Nor does larking about with conferences and office space. It makes you nothing but a common fraud. What makes a real men's rights activist is going out and buying a brand new pair of shoes called the Earl Silverman Memorial Shelter. It's the thought that counts. We don't want you MRAs gallivanting around with concrete.
Right now, there are people who don't want to answer for my crimes as a questioner. They want to say that men's rights activism deserves someone better than me. If you're a part of that crowd, fine. You can have your label back. I only wore it in the hopes my gesture of solidarity would protect men. I only wore it because I couldn't watch a man hounded to suicide by society's indifference. I only wore it out of objection to the excommunication of men's rights activists. If you're going to throw them under the bus, then you can throw me too. But if you want me to get out of your men's rights clubhouse, fine, I'll go. I don't like the label, and I never have. Because the truth is that men's rights is not what I am. Before I was a men's rights activist, I was a questioner, and my questioning brought me to men's rights. My questions brought me to men's rights, but didn't make me stand up for men's rights. Being a person who will not back down from the truth her questions have uncovered make me stand up for men's rights. A questioner questions. A badger does not back down regardless of the forces arrayed against her. I was a questioner and a badger before I ever declared myself a men's rights activist, and I am happy to return to just being what I do, question and badger. There is a fundamental principle here more important than men's rights, the right to question. This fundamental principle is more than men's rights. In fact, pursuing it makes men's rights irrelevant. As a questioner, I acknowledge no authority that denies my right to question. As a badger, I acknowledge no authority that will stop me bringing attention to the truths I've found. And it's not a coincidence I found men's rights issues in the underground chasms where our society hides its bodies.
You clearly just hate feminism.
There is an underground reservoir of men who live lives of quiet desperation. They aren't so damaged that they're homeless or dealing with debilitating mental illness like schizophrenia or extreme drug abuse. They may struggle with anxiety issues, depression. They may be unemployed or marginally employed. They may be living on a couch with family or friends. They aren't on the streets. Maybe they've thought about killing themselves but haven't bought the bullet yet. And service agencies don't really care about them till they can append another adjective to man. Define them in another category: homeless man, suicidal man, mentally ill man, drug addict. And even then, they often only care insofar as those marginal men impact others. These are the men I want to help. The men who need a place to tell their stories, the men who need a way to help as they are helped. As Giovo too says, this means that no outside help is needed, since the people that use the shelter are not there to use resources, but to add to them. Exactly.
What do you mean? What on earth do you think you're going to achieve by trying to inspire and motivate some mild-mannered but slightly eccentric suburbanite clerk stuck in a dead-end job in the patent office? Ridiculous.
To those men and all men, I say this. There is no crisis of masculinity. You're not doing anything wrong as men. Your identity has got you to this point. It has helped you cope with expectations and demands and outright persecution that should have, by all rights, broken you. You don't need to change your desire not to be a burden, because your stories aren't a burden. They're a gift, a heritage, a history, a way of telling other men they're not alone, and something more. Men's stories are a gift to women, even if most women don't realize it yet. We here at Honey Badger Radio are not mental health professionals, and most times I'm pretty damn sure that's a good thing. We're artists, and we're storytellers. We can't create a helpline for men, but we can create an archive, a place where men's stories matter, a place where you can walk through the door and see a library of the words society doesn't want to hear.
Like my old grandmama used to say, it was I who burned down the library at Alexandria. I! And I'll do it again! I'll do it again in an instant, do you hear me? Don't give me that look, boy! Go cut me a switch! You got poop everywhere! She was a fine lady.
Maybe all of this is purely subconscious, teaching little girls that they're victims in order to prevent them from discovering their power is purely subconscious. Still, it's interesting that the powers that be choose to teach girls that they are victims of men, since you don't feel compassion when you're a victim. It's easy to manipulate women's insecurities when we see men's accomplishments and we feel small and insignificant. It's easy to cling to the belief instead that of being less, we're wronged. We're all wronged women, right? And wronged women deserve to see men dead and punished to avenge their dishonor.
Absolutely. I will lay down my life for women. That's what makes me a good person. A man who does not lay down his life for women is a bad person. Yeah, no women should ever lay down their lives. They're already good people. Standards are just for men, darling. Toddle along now.
But ladies, do you really want to continue to be manipulated by the powers that be into seeing yourselves as small, as put upon, as victims? Or do you want to recognize your true power? Not a weasel word like empowerment. Power. Your true power as a woman. Compassion for men. And what would happen if women just kept giving compassion? We just kept laying the foundation for greater and greater cooperation between men with each technological revolution.
Well, you sound like a filthy socialist to me. No, I'm sticking with feminism. They've got this.
In our society, a well-behaved woman serves the man on the mountain by being seen as a damsel to be saved. She might be a strident victim, an angry victim, a weepy victim. But at the end of the day, she plays the victim, the woman wronged, the woman who deserves to take from the men who've dishonored her and never give a thing. Certainly not compassion. In our society, a well-behaved woman plays the victim. Well, I aim to misbehave.
You think you're good, don't you? You think you got pretty eyes, don't you? All swanning about being adorable or whatever. Well, you're not fooling me.
My father has always believed that I was smart and creative and strong-willed and determined. He always believed those things even when I didn't. He believed in me even when I didn't. He believes these things so much that when an 8-year-old kid told him that she had a plan to change all the political and social systems of the planet, he took her seriously enough to give her some very good advice about being careful not to kill people in the process.
Blind old fool. Can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. Not that a daddy's girl would know anything about self-sufficiency.
My anxiety and depression issues dogged me constantly. Add to that bouts of reoccurring bronchitis and upper respiratory infections. I'd get them and they would last months. One year I was sick for 10 months out of 12. And then a few months after I graduated, I had the worst health crisis of my life. My anxiety got so bad I was in prison in my own home. I couldn't go to the grocery store. I couldn't walk a block from my home without a panic attack. I wasn't able to eat. I lost a lot of weight in a very short amount of time. I was faced with a life and death decision: get better or die. Even in that moment, all alone, my dad was helping me. Break the problem down. Figure out what you need to solve it. I looked for a solution, and I found out that I had to rebuild the way I thought about the world. Rehabilitating my mind was an excruciating process. I remember the first therapy sessions with my therapist. Just talking to him on the phone was enough to incite panic attacks that left me terrified and breathless. Once again, I wasn't fighting for accolades or rewards. I was fighting for what most people take for granted: the ability to walk a block without fear, to shop without fear, to go on a car trip without fear. I remember thinking many times, I'll never make it. I'll never be free of this illness. But what my father taught me was there, with me every step of the way.
What a selfish little madam you are! There are women out there getting catcalled every day, and all you're worried about is your father's right to mansplain. Well, I never... deal with him now.
My dad is the reason why Honey Badger Radio exists. And the gift I want to give my father, my dad, for that, the gift I want to give my dad for Father's Day, is a world that recognizes how important fathers are for their children, how important he was for me. But since I can't give him that yet, I'll give him a growing community that believes exactly that. This community. I give him the Badgers.
You should have bought him a tie.
We need to trust each other. I trust you to catch me when I throw myself on the mercy of the crowd, and you trust me not to compromise my values. For anything. Not time, tide, loss, love, and certainly not money. We stand for integrity. We stand for free speech. We stand for respect for each other. And we stand for compassion for all. Every single one of us. So every single hand extended out in trust, even if it holds $3, or if it's held out to help, every single hand matters, because it's an act of trust. And that kind of trust can move mountains.
Oh, for heaven's sake. You know, for someone who calls themselves a socialist, you certainly do take advantage of volunteer capitalism. Oh, wait, it was me who called you a socialist. Well, you sound like a filthy capitalist to me. No, I'm sticking with feminism. They're on the ball.
Sometimes when I think about everything that needs to be fixed, it gets daunting. But when that happens, you need to sit back and look at things from a practical, grounded perspective. For the first time in my life, I found a group of people who don't just mind me asking uncomfortable questions, they pay me to do it. And strangely enough, some of you do mind the questions I ask and pay me to ask them for exactly that reason, which has been astounding to me.
It's not just your financial supporters. Have you seen your comment sections? In everyone else's channel, it's wall-to-wall, you're awesome, you're a genius platitudes from people who only just appeared yesterday. At Honey Badger Radio, it's you suck, you're doing it wrong, you're saying everything wrong, and you suck. From people who haven't missed an episode for 3 years. There are cartoonishly absurd people following you around and heckling everything you do. Have you considered devising a way of satirizing this?
This is a problem. This problem that we're talking about, it's a world big. When I first looked into it, I realized it's entirely possible I won't see the solution come about. It's entirely possible that the solution will take centuries. It took centuries for Western civilization to end slavery. Outside of the West, it still hasn't ended. So what I can do to make something that will, what I can do is to make something that will last the centuries. The centuries it'll take to see the end of the problem and the beginning of the solution.
Bloody culture warriors and your long-term strategies. Why don't you just leave the mainstream media to its own devices? It'll be fine. Why do you care? It's someone else's job to care. And I'm sure they're making a sterling effort.
So what can I do to create something that will last the centuries it might take to see the end to this problem and the beginning of the solution? A business. Even if it's small, a business can endure. It can serve a small market and hold the seed of hope for centuries. Most businesses that last centuries are modest affairs, and they do last centuries. The oldest company on this planet, a Japanese construction firm, is older than Islam. A business can outlast regimes, nations, religions. It can be there when the solution to this issue finally sets the human heart on fire. In that sense, if Honey Badger Radio is there, I will be there. And you will be there.
And I'll be there. The Commedia dell'arte movement only lasted 2 centuries. Largely because it was banned by that upstart Napoleon. But the puppet version of it, known as Punch and Judy, has continued to play out to this very day on rickety seaside stalls all over Britain's shores. You wouldn't know this to look at me, but puppets do not age.
Never forget that you've given me a shot at creating something that can make change. You've given a crippled kid who was considered an annoyingly stupid girl who asked way too many questions a second chance at making a business. You, who are supposed to be the most vile misogynist on the planet, did that for me. Look at this. You helped me buy an office building. If anything disproves patriarchy theory, it's Honey Badger Radio. You are the monsters under the feminist bed, and you are some of the kindest, most generous men and women on the planet.
Are you crying again? You're such a wuss.
Compassion really means something to you. It must if you apply it to all people, including men. It must if you gave me that second chance. And in return, I will do my best to create something that will serve and endure for you. A business that will stand for the human dignity of men, for their right to a defense, and for the right of women to be recognized as individuals, and not measuring sticks. For as long as it takes, I will build this. And I will build something that will endure.
Ahem. You are not entitled to my money. You are not entitled to my support. You are not entitled to my attention.
Thank you.
You are not entitled to my money. You are not entitled to my support. You are not entitled to my attention. Got that? I know you didn't say that, or even imply it, but you made a very impassioned speech just now, and I don't trust impassioned speeches, because I can't tell the difference between a moral argument and a logical argument if it involves other people's emotions. So I think it's very important that I give the other side of the moral argument. And naturally, the other side of this moral argument is, I really like my stuff. This stuff I have, it's mine. It belongs to me. I know you've been secretly coveting all my precious stuff, but you can't have it, Mr. Entitled. I mean Mrs. Entitled. Sorry, old habits die hard. But yes, no, I'm not going to give my stuff to a crying woman. It's very obviously a trap. And traps are gay.
What if the whole world thinks you're wrong? What if the whole world hates you? What if the whole world jeers at you, mocks you, spits at you? Would you keep going? Yes, I would.